I couldn't reach my daughter for 5 days. When I went to her house, I heard scratching under the bed. Chapter 1. The phone rang 5 times and went to voicemail. That made 43 calls in 5 days. 43 times I heard my daughter's recorded voice tell me to leave a message. 43 times I hung up without speaking. My name is Margaret. I am 64 years old. I live alone in a small house in Phoenix, Arizona. My daughter, Emily, lives 30 miles away in a rented duplex near the college where she teaches art history. We spoke every Sunday at 6 in the evening. That was our rule. She never broke it. Last Sunday, the phone rang and rang. No answer. I left a message. Emily, it's Mom. Call me when you get this. She did not call. Monday morning, I called again. Nothing. Tuesday, I drove to her house. Her car was in the driveway. A blue Honda Civic with a dent on the passenger side from when she backed into a fire hydrant 2 years ago. I knocked on the front door. No answer. I looked through the front window. The living room looked normal. Books on the shelf. A coffee mug on the side table. The television off. I walked around the back. The sliding glass door was closed. The curtains were drawn. I called the campus police at the college. They said she had not shown up for her Monday morning lecture. They said they would check her house. I waited in my car across the street. 2 officers arrived. They knocked. They looked through the windows. They told me there was no sign of forced entry. They said she probably went out of town and forgot to tell me. They said I should not worry. But I am her mother. I know worry. I have known it since the day she was born, a tiny thing with a full head of red hair and a cry that could wake the neighbors. She was my only child. Her father left us when she was 3. I raised her alone. We were a unit. A pair. She told me everything. She would never forget to call. Wednesday morning, I drove back. The car was still there. The curtains were still drawn. I sat in my car for 2 hours. I watched the house. I watched the neighbors come and go. An old man walking his dog. A young woman jogging. A delivery truck dropping off a package at the house next door. Nobody went to Emily's door. Nobody came out. Thursday, I went to the police station. I filed a missing person report. The officer behind the desk was a young man named Rodriguez. He had kind eyes and a weary smile. He asked me questions. When did I last speak to her? Had she been depressed? Was she involved with anyone? Did she have financial problems? I answered everything. No. 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 She was a happy girl. She had a boyfriend named Mark, but they broke up 3 months ago. She was fine. She was always fine. Officer Rodriguez said he would look into it. He said there was not much they could do until 72 hours passed. I told him it had already been 120 hours. He wrote something on a form. He said they would check again. I went back to her house Thursday evening. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and red. I walked up to the front door and knocked. I called her name. Emily. It's Mom. Please. The sound of my voice bounced off the empty street. I pressed my ear against the front door. I listened. At first, I heard nothing. Just the hum of the air conditioner. The distant bark of a dog. My own heartbeat. Then I heard something else. A sound. Quiet and rhythmic. It came from inside the house. Scratching. I stepped back. My breath caught in my throat. The scratching was soft but steady. It sounded like nails on wood. Fingernails. It came from somewhere inside. I pressed my ear to the door again. The scratching continued. It was coming from the second floor. From Emily's bedroom. I looked around the neighborhood. No one was outside. The curtains on the neighboring houses were drawn. The street was empty. I walked to the back of the house. The sliding glass door still closed. Still locked. I cupped my hands around my eyes and pressed my face to the glass. The living room was dark. I could make out the shape of the couch. The coffee table. A floor lamp that my mother left me and I gave to Emily when she moved out. Everything was in its place. Everything was normal. I knocked on the glass. Emily. Emily, are you in there? No response. I knocked harder. The glass rattled in its frame. Nothing. I walked back to the front of the house. The scratching had stopped. I stood there in the growing darkness and listened. My heart pounded in my ears. My hands shook. I told myself it was probably an animal. A mouse in the wall. A rat scratching inside the insulation. These old houses had problems like that. It did not mean anything, but I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I went back to my car and sat for a long time. I watched the house. The porch light was off. The front windows were dark. The blue Honda sat in the driveway like a loyal dog waiting for its master. I thought about Emily. I thought about her laugh, her smile, the way she rolled her eyes when I said something silly. I thought about the last conversation we had. A week ago Sunday. We talked about her classes. The students were good this year. She was planning a trip to Santa Fe with her friend Claire. She sounded happy. She sounded fine. I thought about the scratching. I could not get it out of my mind. Fingernails on wood. Soft. Rhythmic. Persistent. Something in me knew it was not a rat. It was not a mouse. It was something else. I drove home that night and did not sleep. I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling. The clock on my nightstand ticked. 2 in the morning. 3 in the morning. 4 in the morning. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the scratching. I saw Emily's face. Her green eyes. Her red hair. Her smile. I got up at 5 and made coffee. My hands were unsteady. I spilled grounds on the counter and left them there. I drank the coffee black even though I usually took cream. It was hot and bitter and it burned my throat. I did not care. I called Officer Rodriguez at 8. He said he had sent a patrol car to the house. No one answered. No signs of forced entry. They looked through the windows. Everything appeared normal. He said there were no open cases matching her description. He said she was an adult and she had the right to disappear. He said I should wait. I told him about the scratching. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Ma'am, it was probably a rodent. Or the wind. Or your imagination. When people are anxious, their minds play tricks on them." I knew he was trying to be kind. I knew he thought I was an old woman losing her grip. But I heard what I heard. I know the difference between my mind playing tricks and my daughter scratching to get out. I called a locksmith. A man named Earl came to my house in a white van. He was in his 50s, with a gray beard and tired eyes. I told him I needed to get into my daughter's house. I told him I was concerned for her safety. He asked for identification. I showed him my driver's license. I showed him a photo of Emily. I showed him a utility bill with her address and my name as an emergency contact. He shrugged. He said he would do it. We drove separately. I followed his van through the empty morning streets. The sun was up now, but it was still cool. The desert air smelled like creosote and dust. I parked across the street and watched as Earl walked up to Emily's front door. He knelt down with his tools. He worked the lock for about 30 seconds. There was a click. The door swung open. Earl stood up. He looked at me. "I'll wait out here," he said. "You go in. Call me if you need anything." I walked up the front steps. My legs felt weak. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stepped through the doorway into the living room. The air was warm and heavy and smelled like something I could not identify. It was not a bad smell. It was just strange. Like dust and old fabric and something sweet underneath. I stood still and listened. The house was silent. No scratching. No sound at all. I called out, "Emily, it's Mom. I'm coming in." My voice echoed off the walls. I walked through the living room. The coffee mug was still on the side table. A dark ring of dried coffee at the bottom. The books on the shelf were arranged in the same order I remembered. A biography of Frida Kahlo. A collection of Emily Dickinson poems. A textbook on Renaissance art. I touched the spine of the Dickinson book. It was dusty. I walked to the kitchen. The dishes were in the sink. A bowl with dried oatmeal stuck to the bottom. A spoon. A glass with a 1/4 inch of water. The garbage can was half full. I opened the refrigerator. Milk that had soured. A carton of eggs. Some vegetables going limp. A container of leftover Chinese food with mold growing on it. It had been 5 days. She had been gone for 5 days. I walked to the stairs. The staircase was narrow and steep. The carpet was worn in the middle. I gripped the banister and climbed. Each step felt heavier than the last. The hallway upstairs was dark. I flipped on the light. 3 doors. The bathroom. A spare room she used as an office. And her bedroom at the end of the hall. The door to her bedroom was closed. I walked up to it and pressed my ear to the wood. I listened. Nothing. Just silence. I grabbed the door handle and turned. It was locked. I called down to Earl. The bedroom is locked. Can you open it? He came up the stairs. His footsteps were heavy on the wooden steps. He knelt in front of the door and went to work with his tools. I stood behind him. My hands were clasped together. My nails dug into my palms. Earl worked the lock. Click. He stood up. He stepped aside. It's open, he said. He looked at me with something in his eyes. Concern. Or maybe pity. I could not tell which. I reached out and turned the handle. The door swung open. I stepped into the room. It was dark. The curtains were drawn. The air was thick and heavy. I could smell something now. Something that made my stomach turn. It smelled like sweat. Like stale air. Like something metallic underneath it all. The bed was made. The pillows were fluffed. The sheets were pulled tight. Emily was a neat person. She could not stand clutter. She made her bed every morning the moment she got up. She said it set the tone for the day. Everything in this room was perfectly in place. I looked around. The dresser. The nightstand. A lamp. A book on the nightstand, face down and open. I picked it up. It was a novel. The bookmark was 3/4 of the way through. She was reading it. She had been reading it when something happened. I looked under the bed. The dust ruffle hung down to the floor. I lifted it. The space underneath was dark and empty. No boxes. No shoes. Just bare floorboards. I let the ruffle fall back into place. I stood in the middle of the room. Earl was in the doorway. Everything okay? He asked. I nodded. I did not trust my voice. Then I heard it. Scratching. Soft. Rhythmic. It came from beneath me. Under the floor. Under the bed. But I had looked under the bed. There was nothing there. The scratching continued. It was coming from below the floorboards. Below the rug. Below the bed. I dropped to my knees. I pulled back the rug. It was a small oval rug with a floral pattern. I pulled it away from the bed. Underneath, I saw the floorboards. They were old and worn. And one of them was loose. I looked closer. The edges of one board were broken. Like someone had pried it up and put it back down. I could see a small gap along the side. I hooked my fingers under the edge and pulled. The board came up with a groan. I looked down into the darkness beneath. It was a crawl space. The space between the floor and the ceiling below. I could not see anything, but I could hear the scratching. I reached down into the darkness. My fingers touched something. Soft. Warm. I pulled my hand back. My heart was racing. My breath was coming in gasps. I looked at Earl. His face was pale. Call the police, I said. He pulled out his phone and dialed. I heard him speaking. I heard him giving the address. I heard the word emergency and suspicious. I turned back to the hole in the floor. I needed to see. I needed to know. I reached down again. This time I found the edge of a wooden board. I pulled. It came loose. I moved it aside. I looked down into the darkness. And I saw my daughter. She was lying in the crawl space. Her body was curled up. Her red hair was matted and dirty. Her clothes were torn. Her eyes were closed. I could see her chest moving up and down. Barely. She was breathing. She was alive. Emily, I said. The sound came out as a croak. A broken whisper. I reached down and touched her face. Her skin was cold. Sticky with sweat. My hand found her wrist. I felt for a pulse. It was there. Weak. Thready. But there. Help, I yelled. Help me. She's down here. My daughter is down here. Earl dropped the phone and ran to me. He looked down into the hole. His face went white. Jesus Christ, he said. We reached down together. Earl grabbed her shoulders. I grabbed her legs. We pulled her up. Her body came up through the opening. She was limp. Unconscious. We laid her on the bedroom floor. I knelt beside her. I brushed the hair from her face. Her cheeks were sunken. Her lips were cracked. There were bruises on her arms and neck. Purple and black and green. Old and new. I touched her forehead. It was hot. A fever. She was burning up. Emily, I said again. I took her hand. I squeezed it. I'm here. Mom's here. Open your eyes. She did not respond. Her face was slack. Her breathing was shallow. I leaned down and put my ear to her chest. Her heart was beating. Slow. Irregular. But beating. I looked around the room. I looked at the bed. The bed that was made so neatly. The pillows fluffed. The sheets pulled tight. I thought about the scratch marks on her arms. On her neck. I looked at her fingernails. They were ragged and broken. The tips were bloody. She had been scratching. Scratching at the underside of the floor. Scratching to get out. Scratching to survive. I heard sirens. Distant at first. Then louder. Closer. The police arrived. Officers in blue uniforms. An ambulance. Paramedics with a stretcher and oxygen and a bag of fluids. They pushed me aside. They worked on her. I watched as they put in 4 in her arm. I watched as they put a mask over her face. I watched as they lifted her onto the stretcher and carried her down the stairs. I followed them outside. The bright sun made me squint. The neighbors were standing in their yards. Watching. Whispering. I walked up to the ambulance. A paramedic blocked my way. A young woman with tired eyes. Ma'am, we have to take her to the hospital. You can follow us. But we need to go now. I nodded. I walked back to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I followed the ambulance through the streets. Red lights. Sirens. Cars pulling aside. We drove to the hospital. St. Joseph's. The same hospital where she was born. I sat in the waiting room for 6 hours. The chairs were hard plastic. The air smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria food. I watched the clock on the wall. The hands moved slowly. Patients came and went. People in wheelchairs. People on gurneys. People with bandages and casts. I sat and waited. A doctor came out. A tall man with gray hair and glasses. He looked tired. He sat down next to me. Mrs. Carter, I nodded. Your daughter is stable. She's dehydrated. She has a fever caused by an infection. We're giving her antibiotics. She's also severely malnourished. She's been without food for several days. How long? I asked. My voice was flat. Hollow. From the state of her body, I'd say 5 or 6 days, he said. He paused. There's something else. She has cuts on her hands. Deep ones. Almost to the bone. It looks like she was trying to dig through something. Wood, probably. The splinters are embedded in her fingers. We've cleaned them out. She'll need time to heal. I sat in silence. The doctor waited. Can I see her? I asked. He nodded. She's asleep. But you can sit with her. They took me to a room. Emily was in a bed. Her face was pale. Her hair was spread out on the pillow. Her hands were wrapped in bandages. I sat in a chair beside her. I took her hand. The one without the 4. I held it. I did not let go. A police officer came into the room. It was Officer Rodriguez. He closed the door behind him. Mrs. Carter, he said. I need to ask you some questions. I know this is difficult. But I need to understand what happened. I told him everything. The phone calls. The days of waiting. The scratching. The loose floorboard. The crawl space. He listened. He wrote in a small notebook. When I was done, he looked at me. Mrs. Carter, did you see anyone else in the house? Any sign of forced entry? Anything out of place? No, I said. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly where it should be. He nodded. I need to ask you something. Does Emily have any history of mental illness, depression, anxiety, anything like that? No, I said. She's healthy. She's happy. She's always been happy. Officer Rodriguez put his notebook away. We'll look into this, he said. We'll talk to her neighbors. We'll talk to her friends. We'll find out what happened. He left. I sat with Emily. I held her hand. I watched her chest rise and fall. I thought about the bed. The neatly made bed. The perfectly fluffed pillows. The sheets pulled tight. I thought about the crawl space. The space beneath the bedroom floor. The space where she had been trapped. I thought about who closed the floorboard over her head, who put the rug back in place, who made the bed so neatly, who locked the bedroom door. It was not Emily. Emily was in the crawl space. Someone else was in the house. I sat in that chair for hours. I did not eat. I did not drink. I just held her hand and watched her breathe. The machines beeped. The Ford dripped. The fluorescent lights hummed. I stared at the wall and replayed everything in my mind. Every detail. Every sound. Every smell. The coffee mug with the dried ring at the bottom. The oatmeal stuck to the bowl. The soured milk. The dusty books. The bed. The perfectly made bed. The pillows. The sheets. Someone had made that bed after Emily was already trapped. Someone had fluffed those pillows. Someone had pulled those sheets tight. Someone who wanted the room to look normal. Someone who wanted to hide what was underneath. I thought about Mark, Emily's ex-boyfriend. The one she broke up with 3 months ago. I had met him twice. He seemed nice. He seemed normal. He brought wine to Thanksgiving. He helped with the dishes. He laughed at my jokes. He held Emily's hand and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. But nice people do not trap their ex-girlfriends under floorboards. Nice people do not leave someone to die in the dark. Nice people do not sleep in the bed above their victim while she scratches and claws and screams for help. I thought about his face. His smile. His eyes. They were kind eyes. Warm eyes. Eyes that hid something dark. Something I could not see because I did not want to see. I looked at Emily. She shifted in her sleep. Her brow furrowed. Her lips moved. She was having a nightmare. I leaned forward and whispered to her. "It's okay, baby. You're safe. I'm here." She settled. Her face relaxed. I stayed with her through the night. The nurses came and went. They checked her vitals. They changed her 4 bags. They gave her medications. I watched them work. I asked questions. How was she doing? Was she getting better? When could she wake up? They answered with patience. They said she was improving. They said she needed rest. They said to be patient. I do not do patient. I do not do waiting. I had done enough of both. 5 days of waiting. 5 days of patient. And my daughter nearly died because of it. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was coming up. The sky was pink and orange. The mountains were dark silhouettes in the distance. The city was waking up. Cars on the streets. People starting their day. The world moving on. But my world had stopped. It stopped the moment I heard that scratching. And it would not start again until Emily opened her eyes. A nurse came in. A young woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "Mrs. Carter, you should go home. You need to rest. We'll call you if anything changes." "No," I said. "I'm staying." She nodded. She did not argue. She brought me a blanket and a pillow. She brought me coffee. She brought me a sandwich. I ate because I knew I needed to. I drank the coffee. I wrapped myself in the blanket and sat back in the chair. I watched Emily. I waited. At noon, her eyes opened. She blinked. She looked at the ceiling. She turned her head. She saw me. Her face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She tried to speak, but her voice was gone. A raspy whisper. "Mom." I leaned in close. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." She squeezed my hand. Her fingers were weak. The bandages were thick. "The floor," she whispered. I couldn't get out. "I know," I said. "You're safe now. You're in the hospital. The doctor says you're going to be okay." She shook her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. No, you don't understand." Her voice was thin. Fading. "He's still there." I froze. "Who? Baby, who's still there?" She closed her eyes. Her breathing was rapid. Shallow. "Mark," she said. My blood turned cold. Mark. Her ex-boyfriend. The one she broke up with 3 months ago. The one she said was a nice guy, but it just did not work out. The one she never wanted to talk about. "Tell me what happened," I said. She opened her eyes. She looked at me. Her gaze was distant. Hollow. "He came over," she said. "Last Saturday. We were supposed to talk. He said he wanted to get back together. I told him no. I told him to leave. He got angry." She paused. Her throat moved. She swallowed. He hit me. I fell. He knocked me out. When I woke up, I was in the dark. Under the floor. I heard him walking around. I heard him making the bed. I heard him lock the door. I tried to scream, but he taped my mouth. He taped my hands. He taped my feet. She looked down at her bandaged hands. I got the tape off my hands. I used my teeth. It took me hours. I tried to scratch through the wood. I tried to dig my way out. But it was too thick. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get out. I held her hand. My tears fell on the blanket. It's okay, I said. You're out now. He's gone. No, she said. He's not gone. He's still there. He has a key. He's been coming back. I could hear him. Every night. I heard him open the door. I heard him walk upstairs. I heard him climb into the bed and sleep. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide. He's been living in my house. For 5 days. He thinks I'm dead. He thinks I'm buried under the floor. He thinks no one will ever know. I stood up. I looked at the wall. I could not breathe. My mind was spinning. Mark. The boyfriend who was supposed to be so nice. The boyfriend who had a key. The boyfriend who had access to my daughter's house. The boyfriend who had the opportunity. The boyfriend who had the motive. I thought about the bed. The neatly made bed. The pillows fluffed. The sheets pulled tight. He had been living there. In her room. Sleeping in her bed. While she was trapped beneath him, scratching and clawing to get out. I grabbed my phone. I called Officer Rodriguez. I told him everything. He said he would send officers to the house immediately. He said they would check for Mark. He said they would arrest him. Emily fell asleep. Her hand lay limp in mine. The doctor came in. He checked her vitals. He said she was improving. He said she would need a few more days in the hospital. He said she would be okay. I stayed with her. I sat in the chair and watched her sleep. I thought about the 5 days she spent in that dark crawl space. 5 days without food. 5 days without water. 5 days of hearing her own killer walking above her, sleeping in her bed, waiting for the body to rot. I thought about Mark. A tall man. Handsome. Charming. Emily had brought him to my house once for Thanksgiving. He brought a bottle of wine and helped with the dishes. He made small talk with my neighbors. He seemed so normal. He seemed so nice. But monsters always look normal. They always seem nice. That is how they get close to you. My phone rang. It was Officer Rodriguez. Mrs. Carter, he said. We went to the house. He was there. He was sitting in the living room. He had a suitcase full of cash. He was waiting for you. Waiting for me, I asked. He knew you would come back, the officer said. He knew you would find Emily. He was going to hurt you. He planned to kill you both. He didn't want any witnesses. I felt my knees buckle. I leaned against the wall. Where is he now? He's in custody, the officer said. He's being processed. He'll be charged with kidnapping. Attempted murder. He's not going anywhere for a long time. I hung up. I looked at my daughter. She was still asleep. Her face was peaceful. The color was coming back to her cheeks. I sat down in the chair next to her bed. I took her hand. I held it. I thought about all the times I told her to be careful. All the times I told her to lock her doors. All the times I told her that men could be dangerous. She used to roll her eyes. She used to tell me I was being dramatic. She used to tell me I was old-fashioned. I wish I had been more dramatic. I wish I had told her to change the locks. I wish I had told her to block his number. I wish I had done more. But I am her mother. And I did what mothers do. I kept calling. I kept knocking. I kept looking. I did not stop. I never stopped. 3 days later, Emily was discharged from the hospital. Her hands were healing. The cuts were closed. The infection was gone. She had lost 15 pounds. Her clothes hung loose on her body. Her hair was dull and lifeless. But her eyes were clear. She was coming back. I took her to my house. She did not want to go back to her own house. She said she could not. Not after what happened. I told her she could stay with me as long as she needed. I made up the guest room with fresh sheets and fluffed pillows. She laughed when she saw the pillows. I said she needed to rest. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked out the window at the desert. I thought I was going to die, she said. In that crawl space. I thought I was going to die and no one would ever know. I knew, I said. I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. That's why I came. She looked at me. What if you hadn't, she asked. What if you had just waited? I sat down next to her. I put my arm around her. I was never going to stop looking, I said. I called you 43 times. I drove to your house 5 times. I called the police. I broke into your house. I pulled up the floorboards. I was not going to stop. Not until I found you. She leaned into me. Her body was shaking. Quiet sobs shook her shoulders. I hate him, she said. I hate him for what he did. But I hate myself for letting him in. For trusting him. For not seeing what he was. Don't, I said. Don't blame yourself. He fooled all of us. He fooled me. I sat at a table with him at Thanksgiving. I smiled at him. I gave him leftovers to take home. I had no idea what he was capable of. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, but you knew something was wrong. You came for me. You found me. Because I'm your mother, I said. That's what we do. We never stop. We never give up. We fight for our children until the very end. She fell asleep that night in the guest room. I stood in the doorway and watched her. She was curled up under the blankets. Her face was peaceful. The nightmares had not come yet. I knew they would. They always do. But for now, she was resting. She was safe. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I leaned against the counter and stared out the window. The desert was dark. The stars were out. The air was cool and still. I thought about the last week. The phone calls. The driving. The waiting. The scratching. The floorboard. The darkness. I thought about Mark. Sitting in my daughter's living room with a suitcase full of cash. Waiting for me. Planning to kill me. He had it all figured out. He would kill Emily and bury her under the floor. He would kill me and bury me somewhere else. He would take the money and disappear. He would start a new life. He would get away with it. But he did not count on me. He did not count on a 64-year-old woman who would not stop calling. Who would not stop driving. Who would not stop knocking. Who would not stop listening. He did not count on the scratching. He did not count on a mother's love. I finished my water and went to bed. I slept better than I had in days. Not well, but better. I knew Emily was safe. I knew Mark was in custody. I knew the worst was over. The next morning, I made coffee and scrambled eggs. Emily sat at the kitchen table. She was wrapped in a blanket. She held the coffee mug with both hands. I watched her drink. I watched her eat. She took small bites. She moved slowly. But she was eating. She was drinking. She was alive. She looked at me across the table. What happens now? She asked. What do you mean? I mean, what do I do? How do I go back to normal? How do I go back to my life after what he did? I reached across the table and took her hand. You take it one day at a time. You go to therapy. You talk to people who understand. You don't rush it. You let yourself heal. And you never, ever blame yourself for what he did. She nodded. She squeezed my hand. Okay, she said. One day at a time. We spent the next few weeks together. I took her to doctor's appointments. I sat with her when she talked to a therapist. I held her hand when she had nightmares. I made her meals and watched her eat. I took her for walks in the desert. I showed her the cacti and the wildflowers and the sunsets. I reminded her that the world was still beautiful. That there was still good in it. That she had a future. She started to heal. Her hands healed first. The bandages came off. The scars were still there. Pink and raised and angry. But they were healing. She started to smile again. Small smiles at first. Then bigger ones. She started to laugh. She started to talk about the future. She talked about going back to teaching. She talked about taking that trip to Santa Fe. She talked about getting her life back. I watched her get stronger every day. I watched the color come back to her cheeks. I watched the light come back to her eyes. I watched my daughter come back to me. But there was one thing she could not do. She could not go back to her house. She tried. Twice. She drove there and parked across the street. She sat in her car and stared at the blue Honda in the driveway. She stared at the front door. She stared at the bedroom window. She sat there for an hour each time. Then she drove away. She could not bring herself to go inside. I did not push her. I knew she would get there eventually. I knew she had to do it on her own terms. I knew she had to be ready. 3 weeks after she was discharged, we went to court. Mark was brought out in handcuffs. His hair was unkempt. His eyes were hollow. He looked nothing like the handsome man who had brought wine to my Thanksgiving table. He looked like a monster. Because that is what he was. A monster in human skin. The judge read the charges. Kidnapping. False imprisonment. Attempted murder. Assault. The list went on and on. Mark pleaded guilty. He did not have much choice. The evidence was overwhelming. His fingerprints were on the floorboards. His DNA was on the tape. His car was seen on the street at the time Emily went missing. The neighbors remembered seeing him. They remembered hearing a fight. They remembered hearing a scream. They did nothing. They told the police they thought it was a domestic dispute. They thought it was not their business. They thought someone else would call. No one did. Mark was sentenced to 25 years to life. The judge told him he would have a long time to think about what he had done. Emily sat beside me in the courtroom. She held my hand. She did not cry. She did not look at him. She stared straight ahead. Her face was calm. She was stronger than I ever knew. The trial ended. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright sun. Emily let go of my hand. She looked up at the sky. She took a deep breath. Then she turned to me. "I want to go to my house," she said. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "I need to do this. I need to take it back." We drove to her house. Emily sat in the passenger seat. She was quiet. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her knuckles were white. I parked across the street. We sat there for a moment. Then Emily got out of the car. I followed her. She walked up to the front door. She pulled out the new keys she had ordered. She unlocked the door. She pushed it open. She stepped inside. I followed her. The house looked different. The police had been there. They had taken evidence. They had left marks. The living room was clean. The kitchen was clean. The bedroom was clean. Someone had been hired to clean. The air smelled like bleach and pine. Emily walked through the living room. She touched the books on the shelf. She touched the spine of the Dickinson book. She walked to the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator. It was empty. She opened the cabinets. They were empty. She had not been back. She had not stalked anything. She walked to the stairs. She climbed them slowly. I followed behind her. I watched her feet on the worn carpet. I watched her hand grip the banister. I watched her shoulders rise and fall with each breath. She walked to the bedroom door. It was open. She walked inside. She stood in the middle of the room. She looked at the bed. It was bare. The mattress was stripped. The pillows were gone. The sheets were gone. Everything was gone. She turned and looked at the floor. The rug was gone. The floorboards were bare. The loose board had been put back in place. It was flush with the others. You could not even tell it was there. But we knew. We both knew. Emily knelt down. She touched the floor. She traced the edges of the loose board with her fingers. She did not cry. She just knelt there, touching the wood. Remembering. I knelt beside her. I put my hand on her back. "You don't have to do this," I said. "We can leave. We can come back another time." "No," she said. "I have to face it. I have to face what happened. I can't run from it forever." She stood up. She looked at me. Her eyes were clear. Her jaw was set. "I'm going to stay here tonight," she said. "I need to sleep in this room. I need to prove to myself that I'm not afraid anymore." I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to tell her it was too soon. I wanted to take her back to my house and wrap her in blankets and make her eggs and watch her sleep. But I looked at her face. I saw the determination. I saw the strength. I saw the woman she was becoming. "Okay," I said. "But I'm staying with you." She nodded. "I was hoping you would say that." We went to the store. We bought new sheets, new pillows, new blankets. We bought a new rug. A new one. One that did not have any memories attached to it. We bought groceries. We bought cleaning supplies. We went back to her house and made the bed. We fluffed the pillows. We pulled the sheets tight. We set the new rug on the floor. We made dinner. We ate at the kitchen table. We talked about normal things. Her classes. Her students. Her plans for the future. We did not talk about Mark. We did not talk about the crawl space. We did not talk about the scratching. When it was time to sleep, Emily walked into her bedroom. I followed her. She stood at the foot of the bed. She looked at it. Then she climbed in. She lay down. She pulled the covers up to her chin. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide. Can you stay? She asked. I pulled a chair up next to the bed. I sat down. I took her hand. I'm not going anywhere, I said. She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. I sat there in the darkness. I listened to the house. The hum of the air conditioner. The distant bark of a dog. The creak of old wood settling. And then I heard something. Soft. Rhythmic. Coming from underneath the bed. I froze. My heart stopped. I leaned forward and listened. It was still there. The scratching. I looked at Emily. She was asleep. Her face was peaceful. She did not hear it. She was safe. I looked at the floor. At the new rug. At the spot where the loose board used to be. I listened to the scratching. It was coming from under the floor. From the crawl space. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake Emily and get her out of that house. But I forced myself to stay. I forced myself to listen. I forced myself to be brave. And then I realized. It was not scratching. It was not fingernails on wood. It was not an animal. It was something else. Something mechanical. Something that had been there all along. The pipes. The old pipes running under the house. When the air conditioner kicked on, the pipes expanded and contracted. They made a sound. A soft, rhythmic sound. Like scratching. Like fingernails on wood. I let out a breath. I slumped back in the chair. I looked at my daughter. She was sleeping peacefully. She was safe. The monster was in prison. The house was clean. The pipes were just pipes. But I could not sleep. I sat there all night, holding her hand, listening to the scratching. I knew what it was now. But I still could not stop hearing it. I could not stop remembering. Because sometimes, the past does not let go. Sometimes, the sounds stay with you. Sometimes, you hear them even when they are gone. I stayed with Emily until the sun came up. She woke up and smiled at me. You stayed, she said. I told you I would, I said. She sat up. She looked around the room. She took a deep breath. I did it, she said. I slept in here. I survived. I smiled at her. You're stronger than you know, baby. You always were. Emily kept sleeping in her house. Every night, she climbed into that bed and closed her eyes. The first week, I stayed with her. I sat in the chair next to her bed and held her hand until she fell asleep. I listened to the pipes scratch and creak. I watched her face relax. I made sure she was safe. The second week, she told me I could go home. She said she needed to do it on her own. She said she would call me if she needed me. I did not want to leave. But I knew she was right. She needed to stand on her own 2 feet. She needed to prove to herself that she was not afraid. I went home that night and slept in my own bed for the first time in weeks. I did not sleep well. I kept reaching for the phone. I kept wanting to call her. I kept wanting to hear her voice. But I forced myself to stay still. I forced myself to trust her. She called me the next morning. She said she had slept through the night. No nightmares. No panic. She said she was okay. I believed her. She started going back to work. Part-time at first. A few hours a week. She met with her students in small groups. She graded papers from her home office. She eased back into her routine. She was still fragile. But she was getting stronger. I drove to her house every Sunday. We kept our 6 o'clock call. But now I also visited. I brought groceries. I brought flowers. I brought the houseplant I had promised. I helped her with small repairs around the house. I fixed a leaky faucet. I changed a light bulb. I helped her paint the living room a new color. Something bright. Something happy. She started going out with friends again. Claire picked her up for coffee. They went to the movies. They went for walks. She told me she was laughing again. She told me she was feeling like herself. I believed her. But I knew there was still something inside her. Something she was not saying. Something she was holding on to. One Sunday, she came to my house. She sat at my kitchen table. She had a cup of tea in her hands. She stared at the cup for a long time. Then she looked up at me. I haven't told you everything, she said. I sat down across from her. Tell me now, I said. She took a breath. When I was in that crawl space, I heard everything. I heard him walking around. I heard him talking to himself. I heard him making phone calls. I heard him planning. Planning what? I asked. He was going to take my car. He was going to drive to the border. He had a suitcase full of cash. He was going to disappear. But he couldn't leave until he was sure I was dead. He had to wait for the body to decompose. He had to wait for the smell to start. He had to wait for the neighbors to notice. She paused. Her hands were shaking. He talked about you too. He said you would come looking for me. He said he knew you wouldn't stop. He said he would have to deal with you. He said he would make it look like an accident. I felt cold. I wrapped my arms around myself. He said all that. She nodded. I heard every word. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just lay there in the dark and listened to him talk about killing my mother. She started to cry. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks. I thought about you the whole time. I thought about how you would feel when you found out I was dead. I thought about how you would blame yourself. I thought about how you would never get over it. I thought about how you would be all alone. I reached across the table and took her hands. I'm not alone, I said. I have you. And I'm never going to lose you again. She squeezed my hands. I know. That's what kept me alive. Knowing you would come. Knowing you would find me. Knowing you would never give up. We sat there for a long time. Holding hands. Crying together. Healing together. 2 months after the trial, Emily did something I did not expect. She went back to her bedroom and opened the floorboard. She pulled up the loose board. She looked down into the crawl space. The darkness. The space where she had been trapped. She told me about it later. She said she stood at the edge of that hole and looked down. She said she felt afraid. She said she felt angry. She said she felt sad. But she also felt something else. Something she had not expected. She felt powerful. She said she had survived. She had been trapped in that darkness for 5 days. She had been without food, without water, without hope. And she had survived. She had scratched through the wood. She had clawed her way to the surface. She had made noise. She had called out for help. She had done everything she could to survive. And she had succeeded. She said she looked into that darkness and realized it did not have power over her anymore. She had been in the darkness. She had faced it. And she had come out the other side. She closed the floorboard. She put the rug back in place. She walked away from that spot. She did not look back. I went to her house the next day. She had a new project. She was turning her spare room into an art studio. She had always wanted to paint. She had always wanted to create. She was finally doing it. She showed me the room. The walls were white. The floors were covered in drop cloths. There were easels and canvases and paints. She was going to paint. She was going to make something beautiful out of all the ugliness she had been through. I hugged her. I was so proud of her. Prouder than I had ever been. Mom, she said, there's one more thing I need to do. I looked at her. What is it? I need to go back. To your house. To the day you left to find me. I need to understand how you knew. I did not understand. What do you mean? She walked over to the window. She looked out at the desert. I've been thinking about it, she said. The whole time I was in that crawl space, I was praying that you would come. I prayed that you would know something was wrong. I prayed that you would hear me somehow. And you did. She turned to face me. You called 43 times. You drove to my house 5 times. You broke in. You found me. How did you know what made you keep going? I walked over to her. I put my hand on her shoulder. I heard the scratching, I said. She looked confused. But you were outside. How could you hear it from outside? I shook my head. I don't know. I just heard it. I pressed my ear to the door and I heard it. It was soft. It was rhythmic. It was coming from your bedroom. I knew it was you. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I stopped scratching after the first day. I gave up. I thought it was useless. I just lay there and waited to die. But you heard it. You heard it on Thursday. For days after I stopped. How could you hear something that wasn't there? I opened my mouth to answer. But the words would not come. I thought back to that day. I pressed my ear to the door. I heard the scratching. I was sure of it. It was real. It was there. But if she had stopped scratching, what did I hear? I felt a chill run down my spine. Maybe I imagined it, I said. Maybe I wanted so badly to hear something that my mind created the sound. Emily shook her head. No, Mom. You heard something. You heard it and you came. You found me. I don't care what it was. I don't care if it was real or imagined. It saved my life. She hugged me. I hugged her back. I held her tight, and I did not let go. I did not tell her what I was thinking. I did not tell her about the chill on my spine. I did not tell her about the doubt that was growing in my mind. Because I knew what I heard. I knew it was real. I had pressed my ear to that door and I had heard scratching. Fingernails on wood. Soft. Rhythmic. Persistent. But she had not been scratching. So what had I heard? I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach. I sat in my living room. I stared at the wall. I tried to remember every detail. Every sound. Every smell. I replayed that day over and over in my mind. I had been standing outside Emily's house. It was Thursday evening. The sun was setting. I knocked on the front door. I called her name. I pressed my ear to the door. And I heard it. Scratching. But it was not coming from the floor. It was coming from the bedroom. The second floor. The bedroom where her bed was. The bedroom where the loose floorboard was. The bedroom where she was trapped. But she had stopped scratching after the first day. She told me she gave up. She told me she lay there and waited to die. So what had made that sound? The pipes. It was the pipes. The air conditioner kicking on. The pipes expanding and contracting. That was the sound. That had to be the sound. There was no other explanation. But I knew it was not the pipes. I had heard the pipes later. The sound was different. The pipes were a click. A tap. A rhythmic thump. The scratching was something else. It was nails on wood. It was deliberate. It was human. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. I told myself to let it go. I told myself it did not matter. I found Emily. She was safe. That was all that mattered. The sound was just a sound. It was probably nothing. But I could not shake the feeling. The feeling that something was still there. Something in the darkness. Something that had been watching. Something that had been waiting. I opened my eyes. I looked around my empty house. I listened to the silence. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The wind outside whispered through the desert. And then I heard it. Scratching. Soft. Rhythmic. Coming from somewhere inside my house. I stood up. My heart raced. I turned in a circle. I looked at the walls. The floor. The ceiling. The sound was everywhere and nowhere. It was around me. Inside me. I walked to the front door. I opened it. I stepped outside. The air was cool. The stars were out. The desert was still. I stood in my driveway and listened. The scratching had stopped. I told myself it was nothing. The wind. An animal. My imagination. I was stressed. I was tired. I was hearing things. But I did not go back inside. I stood there for a long time. I looked at the sky. I looked at the mountains. I looked at my house. The house where I had lived alone for 30 years. The house where I had raised my daughter. The house where I had always felt safe. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around. No one was there. I was alone. I went back inside. I locked the door. I locked all the doors. I checked all the windows. I turned on every light in the house. I sat in the middle of the living room and did not move. I told myself I was being foolish. I told myself I was letting my imagination run away with me. I told myself it was over. Mark was in prison. Emily was safe. There was nothing to be afraid of. But I could not shake the feeling. The feeling that something was still there. Something in the darkness. Something that had been waiting for me all along. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my living room with every light on and watched the windows. I watched the doors. I watched the shadows. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. But I could feel something. A presence. A weight in the air. I told myself I was being foolish. I told myself I was exhausted. I told myself it was just the aftermath of everything that had happened. Morning came. The sun rose over the mountains. The light flooded my living room. The shadows retreated. I stood up. My legs were stiff. My back ached. I walked to the kitchen and made coffee. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I told myself it was over. I called Emily. She answered on the first ring. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "I just didn't sleep well. Too much on my mind." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to come over?" "No," I said. "I'm fine. I'll come to you later. We can have lunch." "Okay," she said. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, baby." I hung up. I drank my coffee. I ate a piece of toast. I took a shower. I got dressed. I felt better. The fear from the night before was fading. It was just my imagination. Just stress. Just the leftover trauma from everything we had been through. I drove to Emily's house. She was in her studio. She had paint on her hands and a smile on her face. She showed me what she was working on. It was a painting of the desert. Bright colors. Warm light. She was creating something beautiful. I was so proud of her. We had lunch together. We sat in her kitchen and ate sandwiches. We talked about her classes. She was going back full-time next semester. She was excited. She was ready. She was moving forward. I did not tell her about the scratching. I did not tell her about the feeling of being watched. I did not want to worry her. She had been through enough. She deserved to be happy. She deserved to move on. I went home that evening. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and red. I pulled into my driveway. I looked at my house. It looked the same as always. A small house. A white door. A porch with a rocking chair. It was my home. It had always been my home. It was safe. I walked inside. I locked the door. I turned on the lights. I made myself dinner. I watched television. I went to bed. I lay in the dark and listened. Nothing. Just silence. I closed my eyes. I fell asleep. I woke up at 3 in the morning. The house was dark. The power was out. I sat up in bed. My heart was pounding. I listened. Nothing. Just silence. I reached for my phone. The screen was dark. Dead. No battery. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I stood up. The floor was cold under my bare feet. I walked to the door. I opened it. The hallway was dark. I could not see anything. I felt my way along the wall. My fingers touched the light switch. I flipped it. Nothing. I walked to the living room. The windows were dark. The streetlights were off. The whole neighborhood was black. I walked to the front door. I unlocked it. I opened it. I stepped outside. The air was cold. The sky was clear. The stars were out. I looked up and down the street. Every house was dark. No lights. No sounds. It was like the world had stopped. I heard something. A sound. Soft. Rhythmic. Coming from behind me. From inside my house. Scratching. I turned around. I looked into the dark doorway. I could not see anything. But I could hear it. The scratching. It was coming from somewhere inside. Somewhere deep in the house. "Who's there?" I called out. My voice was thin. Trembling. No answer. Just the scratching. I stepped back inside. I walked toward the sound. It was coming from the kitchen. I walked through the living room. I entered the kitchen. The sound was louder now. It was coming from the floor. From the basement door. I had a basement. It was small. Damp. Full of old boxes and forgotten things. I never went down there. I had no reason to. But the scratching was coming from behind that door. From down those stairs. I reached out. My hand touched the doorknob. It was cold. I turned it. The door swung open. Darkness. Stairs leading down into nothing. The scratching was coming from the bottom. I stood at the top of the stairs. I listened. The scratching continued. Soft. Rhythmic. Deliberate. It was not pipes. It was not an animal. It was something else. Something that wanted me to find it. I took a step down. The stairs creaked under my weight. I took another step. And another. The darkness closed around me. I could not see my hand in front of my face, but I could hear the scratching. It was getting louder. Closer. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The floor was concrete, cold under my feet. I stood still. I listened. The scratching was coming from the far corner. From behind a stack of boxes. I walked toward it. My hands were out in front of me. I touched the boxes. They were dusty. I pushed them aside. I felt for the wall. I found it. My fingers traced the concrete. The scratching was right in front of me. Right at my feet. I knelt down. I touched the floor. It was rough, cold, and then I felt it. A crack. A gap in the concrete. I ran my fingers along it. It was a hole. Big enough for a hand. Big enough for something to come through. The scratching stopped. I froze. I held my breath. I listened. Nothing. Just my own heartbeat. Thumping in my ears. Thumping in my chest. And then I heard something else. A voice. Soft. Whispered. Coming from inside the hole. Mom. I pulled my hand back. I stumbled backward. I hit the boxes. They fell around me. I scrambled to my feet. I ran for the stairs. I tripped. I fell. I crawled. I reached the stairs and climbed. I pulled myself up. I burst through the door into the kitchen. I slammed the door shut. I leaned against it. My chest heaved. My lungs burned. I stood there for a long time. I listened. Nothing. Just silence. I reached for the light switch. I flipped it. The light came on. The power was back. I blinked in the brightness. I looked around the kitchen. Everything was normal. The countertops. The sink. The refrigerator. The basement door. It was closed. It was locked. I had locked it. I always kept it locked. I looked at the door. The lock was intact. The deadbolt was in place. I had not opened it. I had not gone down the stairs. I had imagined it. All of it. The darkness. The power outage. The scratching. The hole in the concrete. The voice. I walked to the living room. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. I looked out the window. The streetlights were on. The neighbors' houses were lit. Everything was normal. I sat on the couch. I put my head in my hands. I was losing my mind. That was the only explanation. The stress. The trauma. The fear. It had all caught up with me. I was losing my grip on reality. I called Emily. It was the middle of the night. But I needed to hear her voice. She answered on the second ring. Mom, what's wrong? Nothing, I said. I just wanted to hear your voice. I had a bad dream. That's all. Are you sure? She asked. Do you want me to come over? No, I said. I'm fine. Go back to sleep. I love you. I love you too, Mom. Call me if you need anything. I hung up. I sat in the dark and stared at the wall. I did not go back to sleep. I did not close my eyes. I sat there and waited for the sun to come up. I waited until 7 a.m. The sun was up. The light was bright. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the basement door. The stairs were there. The concrete floor was there. The boxes were in a stack. Nothing was out of place. No holes. No cracks. Just a solid concrete floor. I closed the door. I locked it. I told myself it was over. I told myself I needed help. I told myself I was going to see a doctor. I was going to tell them about the nightmares. About the scratching. About the voice. I was going to get help. I was going to get better. I called Emily back. I need to see someone, I said. I need to talk to a therapist. I think I'm struggling more than I realized. She was quiet. Then she said, That's okay, Mom. That's more than okay. I'll help you find someone. I'll go with you if you want. Thank you, I said. I love you. I love you too, Mom. I hung up. I felt better. I was taking control. I was facing the problem. I was not going to let the fear win. I went to the doctor. I talked about the stress, the lack of sleep, the anxiety, the scratching, the voice. The doctor was kind. He listened. He said it was likely post-traumatic stress. He said the event with Emily had triggered something in me. He said I needed rest. He said I needed therapy. He said I needed to take care of myself. I did everything he said. I went to therapy. I took medication. I slept. I ate. I exercised. I started to feel better. The scratching faded. The voice faded. The fear faded. I started to feel like myself again. Emily was so supportive. She came to see me every week. She brought me books. She brought me flowers. She brought me the houseplant I had given her. It was thriving. So was she. So was I. We healed together. We grew stronger together. We faced the darkness together. And we came out the other side. One evening, I was sitting on my porch. The sun was setting. The sky was pink and orange. The desert was quiet. I was at peace. I had survived. We had survived. I thought about the scratching. I thought about the voice. I thought about the hole in the basement floor. I had convinced myself it was all a dream. A nightmare. A hallucination. A product of stress and trauma. But there was a part of me that still wondered. A part of me that still questioned. A part of me that still listened. I looked up at the sky. I took a deep breath. I let it go. It did not matter. What mattered was that Emily was alive. What mattered was that we were together. What mattered was that we were moving forward. I walked inside. I locked the door. I turned on the lights. I sat down in my favorite chair. I picked up a book. I started to read. I was content. I did not hear the scratching. I did not feel the presence. I did not see the shadow. Because I was not looking. I was not listening. I was living. And sometimes, that is the only way to survive. To stop looking. To stop listening. To stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. I went to bed that night. I slept peacefully. No dreams. No nightmares. Just silence. Just darkness. Just the warm comfort of my own bed. I woke up the next morning. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. The world was alive. I got up. I made coffee. I called Emily. We talked for an hour. We made plans for lunch. We laughed. We smiled. We were happy. I looked out the window at the desert. I looked at the mountains. I looked at the sky. And I felt grateful. Grateful for my daughter. Grateful for my life. Grateful for everything I had. I did not think about the scratching. I did not think about the voice. I did not think about the darkness. I was not afraid anymore. Or so I told myself. Because deep down, in the part of me that I kept hidden, I still wondered. I still listened. I still remembered. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the house was quiet and the world was still, I would hear it again. Soft. Rhythmic. Persistent. Scratching. But I would turn on the light. I would open my eyes. I would remind myself that it was nothing. Just the pipes. Just my imagination. Just the sound of the wind. And I would fall back asleep. Because that is what we do. We survive. We move forward. We leave the darkness behind. We do not look back. But sometimes, you cannot leave the darkness behind. Sometimes, the darkness follows you home. It was 3 months after the trial. Emily was thriving. She had painted an entire collection of desert landscapes and was planning a small gallery show. She was dating again, a nice man named David who worked at the library. She was happy. She was free. I was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset when I heard it again. Scratching. Coming from inside the house. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I walked inside. The sound was coming from the basement door. I stood in front of it. I listened. The scratching was loud and frantic. Desperate. I reached for the doorknob. I had convinced myself it was nothing. Just my imagination. Just the pipes. But I needed to be sure. I needed to know. I opened the door. The scratching stopped. Silence. I stared into the darkness at the top of the stairs. I waited. I held my breath. Then I heard it. A voice. Faint and broken. Coming from deep below. Mom. Not Emily's voice. Someone else. Someone I had never heard before. But somehow I recognized it. It was the voice of something old. Something dark. Something that had been waiting in the shadows for a very long time. I slammed the door shut. I locked it. I backed away. I grabbed my phone and called Emily. Come over, I said. Please. I need you. She arrived within the hour. I told her everything. The scratching. The voice. The basement. She listened. Her face was pale. But she did not run. She did not tell me it was my imagination. She looked at me with those green eyes, my daughter, and she said, "We need to find out what is down there." I did not want to. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave that house and never come back. But she was right. I could not spend the rest of my life afraid of my own basement. I could not let the darkness win. We opened the door together. We walked down the stairs together. We found the hole in the concrete floor. And we looked inside. There was nothing there. Just dirt. Just rocks. Just the foundation of the house. But we both heard it. We both felt it. A presence. A whisper. A scratch. I covered the hole. I poured concrete into it. I sealed it forever. I do not know what was down there. I do not want to know. But I know that it is gone now. I know that I am free. Emily stayed with me for a week. We slept in the living room with all the lights on. We laughed and we cried and we talked. And when she left, I was not afraid anymore. I still hear the scratching sometimes. Soft and rhythmic. But I do not listen. I do not answer. I turn on the light and I remember what I learned. The darkest things are not always in the crawl space. Sometimes they are inside us. And the only way to beat them is to face them. To seal them. To let them go. I am Margaret. I am 64 years old. I survived. And I will never stop listening.